A professional athlete trains his entire life to make his body indestructible. State-of-the-art facilities, elite nutrition, and multi-million-dollar recovery systems. And yet, tendons fail, ligaments snap, and careers quietly come to an end. But what if the danger isn't in the weight room or on the turf? What if it's something invisible? Something humming quietly in the background day after day, rewriting the rules of biology while everyone insists there's nothing wrong. Tonight, we're not talking about curses, conspiracies, or bad luck. We're talking about exposure and what happens when safety is defined by the wrong question. Because if this theory is even partially correct, the implications don't stop with professional football.
Raise your glass to mysteries, cocktails and conspiracies. Dive into these histories, cocktails and conspiracies. Raise your glass to mysteries, cocktails and conspiracies. Uncover those anomalies, cocktails and conspiracies.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you may be, whether you're tuning in across the nation or around the world. My name is Shane Squarick, and I am joined by the man asking what happens when science ignores the subtle stuff, Mr. Phillips. We are your conspiracy realists back with another episode of Cocktails and Conspiracies. And tonight we are joined by someone who didn't set out to investigate football injuries, but followed the data where it led, even when it got a little uncomfortable. Peter Cowan has spent years thinking about health through a very specific lens: environment, energy, and biology. He joins us tonight on the eve of the Super Bowl to discuss a viral story about whether the most injured team in the NFL may not be cursed by bad luck, bad turf, or bad training, but by something far more subtle, far more constant, and completely invisible. Peter, welcome to Cocktails and Conspiracies. And the one thing I didn't ask you before we started is, how do you pronounce your last name?
It's Cowan, but it's all good.
Cowan.
Everybody
Okay,
says
so
Cowan, so
I'm writing that.
Cowan.
You know what? I wrote it back in my head like 5 or 6 times. I'm like, is it Cowan or Cohen? Cowan or Cohen? And I meant to ask you before we started, but here we are. And that's the beauty of podcasting is I'm not going to edit it. I'm going to admit to that mistake, and we're going to go with it here.
Perfect.
I wanted to start with a little bit of context because your background is something that I can absolutely relate to in myself. And I caught it at the tail end of another interview you were doing. I think it was just kind of a sidebar that you had brought up. But then I found it in some of your writings too. You describe a period where you're working as a software engineer in an environment largely surrounded by routers, access points, wireless devices, artificial light, and you start developing a stack of symptoms that doesn't really make sense on paper. Relentless fatigue, insomnia, digestive issues, and then some tendon and disc problems. You said that the thing that helped you the most wasn't a new pill or a protocol, but it was changing your environment, stepping away from that exposure, getting outdoors, getting sunlight, rebuilding it from there. I say that I can relate for that because my day life is not a podcast host here, but it is as a software developer as well. And so I've often kind of went through that. I'm going through that same cycle myself now where I'm trying protocols and things like that to start to address some of these things that I'm starting to notice are cropping up. This experience pushes you deeper into studying quantum biology. Can you tell us about quantum biology, what it is, and kind of what your breaking point was as a software engineer to push you here?
Yeah, I mean, let's just start with my breaking point and how I accidentally discovered quantum biology. So my breaking point came because I actually, at that point, I was not breathing through my nose. So when I slept, I had to breathe through my mouth. And if you've ever tried to sleep, but breathing through your mouth is terrible.
Mm-hmm.
You just wake up with dry mouth all night. And I would wake up dozens of times a night, and it was not sustainable. So I got surgery. And I had a negative reaction to the anesthesia and basically lived in a fog for 3 months and faked my job just enough just to hang on until summer. And then they laid me off because I had told them, I was like, this tech, tech, like you get lay out every 2 years. It's just
Oh, yeah.
part of the scene. So I prepared this time. And I was like, you know what? If you lay me off, do it right at the beginning of summer so I can actually like hang out in nice weather. And
Smart
so they
man.
did. June 27th, 2019. I booked it's actually a vintage like Airstream trailer out on the coast in South Washington, and just kind of sat on the beach and relaxed and didn't do anything else. And I went home and I didn't have a job and I had some severance. So I just kept doing that. Get up in the morning, go sit in the grass with my bare feet on the grass, got a tan, started feeling a little bit better, went and started swimming in the rivers, which are really cold around here, and just tried to eat really healthy. Which I already was doing, but just I had time to cook food and stuff, and I was eating like a lot of seafood because we have really amazing seafood here. And so that kind of formed the template of my healing. And so I stumbled into it. I basically tripped over my own feet into this healing. But then I had to get a job again, couldn't just live on the
Can't just
beach.
sit on the beach every day.
Yeah, yeah. And also, I like to work, just to be clear. I don't want to be a beach bum. And so I had to figure out how to maintain without being able to just lounge around. And so I just dug in. And so quantum biology, I actually learned about it from this guy named Grimhood. Daniel, I don't remember his last name, but he's a Twitter account. He was a legendary wellness account on X, Twitter back in the day, and he told me, you got to watch the sunrise and get morning light and block the light at night and a couple of other things. And he had a lot of supplements and stuff that I could do to kind of rebuild my system, but it was basically just focus. And he's like, turn the power off on your whole house. Just turn the panel off when you go to bed. Just things that I'd never really considered. And so that kind of turned me on. And the thing that he told me that was critically important to me was that blue light from our screens reduces ATP production. What ATP is basically cellular energy. And nobody had ever told me that before. And I was kind of like just shocking. And I went to my doctor, who's a naturopath, and I asked her, and she didn't know what he was talking about. And so I thought, well, even if my naturopath doesn't know this, I'm probably gonna have to figure out myself. And so I did. And that led me to quantum biology, which is basically, so quantum mechanics is the weird kind of magical things that happen when you get to the subatomic level, when you're dealing with electrons and protons and other subatomic particles. And you get effects that don't make sense in terms of classical physics. And we could spend a whole 5 hours talking about it. So let's not. But so quantum
I'll take
biology
your
is,
word for it.
yeah. And so people often believe that quantum mechanics can't apply to biology because it's too warm and the environment is wet and warm and thermal energy is disruptive. But quantum biology theory says that you can have a coherent system due to other factors that exists in these minute spaces. And in some cases, it persists. And so quantum effects do govern our biology, and it's primarily through things like light and electromagnetic energy. So that's a very high level explanation of what quantum biology is.
It's a subject I'm so infatuated with. You can ask Tim. When we're not talking about conspiracies, I'm talking about biohacking, for lack of a better word, and
Yeah.
trying to just figure out how to unlock that. And I've started to see a lot of what you're talking about there. But we will save that for another discussion and kind of refocus ourselves
Yeah.
for the sake of the audience and maybe for the sake of Tim here. How does this discovery, I guess literal discovery and kind of like self-discovery, end up landing you with the 49ers? Is this just as simple as a frustrated fantasy football fan just getting pissed off because your players keep getting hurt, or
It's
is there
funny.
something more to it?
The next job I got, everyone was into fantasy football. I was like, I'll do it. And immediately I was like, I can't do this. There's too many statistics. And like, I love watching a football fly through the air. To me, it's art. So I don't even know the rules of the game. Honestly, I just love watching it. So no, I went to a Niners game back in 22, Christmas Eve 22, and I saw the substation. And I don't know if you've ever walked by a substation, just kind of like felt weird. They're like buzzing, and then this like stark industrial, just austere machinery that's just like, I don't want to see like how the sausage is made. Like, I just want my electricity. Keep it away from me.
Right.
It's like that feeling. But I kind of, I left and I didn't think about it again until last September when I heard John Feliciano, who's a ex-49er, on a radio program joking. I didn't know that they had the injury problem, except that I saw Dre Greenlaw in the Super Bowl against Kansas City Chiefs snap his Achilles tendon on the sideline on his way into the field. He didn't even make it into the field. I thought, that's really weird. This is like an elite athlete, and he was just like running in to the and so when I heard John Feliciano talking about it, the radio guys are like, why are you guys so injured? Like, everybody knows that they're like the most injured team. It's just like common knowledge, especially if you're a fantasy football player. So I heard him joke about the substation, and they laughed. And then he said, but there's some high level players in the organization who believe it's a problem, and they're taking measures to mitigate against it. And so that's what triggered my interest in this. And just FYI, just yesterday, Christian McCaffrey went on record saying that he is taking measures to protect against this, and he's concerned about this stuff. He's
Well, he
like
needs
this-
it because he's perennially injured. Not to cut you off,
Exact-
but CMC of anybody on that team needs to protect himself. So
Yeah.
good on you, CMC.
Yeah. So they knew about it. And when I hear someone joking like that in public, I think they're joking because they can't be serious, because people won't take them seriously. So I took them seriously. And at that point I was working as a health coach, and I had seen some clients with a condition called mast cell activation syndrome, which goes along with another condition called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which is basically tendon hyperflexibility. And I had made the connection between that and environmental exposure to EMF and blue light and other things. And so I'd done a bunch of research to help them out. So I kind of knew what was going on once I knew that substation was there. And just in my spare time, just started writing an article about it. And I kind of felt like I shouldn't be doing it because I had work I needed to do, but it was just, I felt like so driven to like explain, because just as a health coach, like, the one rule is if somebody tells you they think something's a problem, there's something there. Like, people tend to understand at an intuitive level what's contributing to their health problem. So I hear that players are frustrated about this thing and nobody's listening to them. So I thought somebody needs to listen to them. So that's kind of what was driving me.
Peter, quick question for you that just popped into my brain because I'm a big ghost nut, right? You mentioned EMF. And, in the paranormal world, and not that we're going to delve into that today at all in the slightest bit, but EMF is brought up as something that can cause people to just kind of feel eerie and creepy and just kind of off, right? Now, this substation, is that emitting high EMF levels?
It is. So EMF is a broad category, and EMF is basically electromagnetic radiation, and it's a whole spectrum, and light is part of that spectrum, right in the middle of it. And generally, when we're talking about EMF, though, there's two categories. There's ionizing and non-ionizing. And ionizing is things like X-rays and gamma rays and, like nuclear weapons that are just, it's going to blast your cells, and it's going to knock electrons out of the cells, and it's going to cause direct damage. On the other side is non-ionizing. And the story has always been, it's not harmful because it doesn't directly ionize the cells and remove those electrons. So turns out, though, it does it indirectly. And that's why this story is so controversial. But to answer your question, so these substations do emit very strong magnetic fields, and they're AC magnetic fields, meaning alternating current. So it's like a sine wave. It's going positive and minus over and over again at 60 hertz, 60 times a second. And that's not natural in any way. And it also emits something called dirty electricity, or transient noise, basically, on the line. These high frequency from all the transformers and stuff in all of our tech these days that the companies are now basically putting into the ground. And so you get this ground current with this high frequency noise on it that could theoretically be causing issues as well. So those are both EMF, but they're very different.
Gotcha. Regardless, though, anybody near that substation, right, whether you're working at it or you just happen to be near it for a prolonged period of time, would it be safe to say that those people would be exposed to much higher levels of EMF than the average person walking around, working, living their life?
Yeah, and it does depend on how close you are, but especially with the magnetic field. But with the ground current, it's going to go farther. And yes, I measured an 8.9 where I was standing. I wasn't near the substation, so it's probably from the overhead power lines where I was. But average like ambient exposure at somebody's house is usually like 0.5 to 3 milligauss, and even at 3, that's to me too high.
Why do you think duration matters more than intensity?
It's a really good question, and it's because of what the mechanism that's creating the damage is. So basically, you have mitochondria in your body, which are the powerhouse of the cell. If you take anatomy in
High
high
school
school,
biology.
Yeah.
Yep. I
yeah,
haven't heard that in a long time.
yeah. So you already know a little bit. So you know your mitochondria are giving your body energy, and the typical story is that it takes electrons from foods and puts them into the Krebs cycle, which turns it into ATP. And there's byproducts. There's free radicals, there's water, and there's carbon dioxide, which we breathe out. And in biophysics, though, we do not consider the water to be a byproduct. It's actually one of the core products of cellular respiration. And so basically your body is hydrated by your mitochondria as well. And so when you disturb the mitochondria, you get more free radicals, which leads to something called oxidative stress, which is damage to your cells, and less water. So you're increasing damage and you're decreasing hydration. So the longer you're exposed, the more of that kind of damage you're getting. That's the basic high level theory.
It's basically just dehydrating it to the point where the tendons are breaking down. Is that why it always feels like it's like non-contact when you see it? Like we talked about, Dre Greenlaw
Yep.
walking and snapping his tendon. Is that basically what's happening at that point?
Basically, I mean, I outlined a bunch of different mechanisms, but I think just to keep it simple for most people is like, think about, so collagen is 99.7% water.
Mhm.
And the water is a structural component of the collagen. So I like to think about if you ever like left a rubber band outside sitting in the sun, rubber bands are very nice and stretchy. Leave it out for a couple of days, it just snaps.
Right,
Okay.
right.
And so I don't think rubber is made of collagen, but it's the same idea. And so another analogy I like to think about is like Jell-O is basically collagen, and you make it with the right proportions. It's really jiggly and stuff. You put not enough water in there and it's kind of, it doesn't really shake around. It's kind of brittle and weird. So the water is like a key part of the structural integrity of that collagen that makes it flexible and strong.
Why wouldn't showing my ignorance maybe a little bit in the medical world, but why wouldn't standard blood work or physicals or any sort of imaging that I'm sure these athletes are getting, why isn't this catching this on film early? Or is it maybe just not something that's looked at?
I don't think it's really looked at, and I think it has a little bit to do with how maybe I don't want to put it completely just on finance, but finance and just the pace of how research enters the medical system and the standards of care and what the profit motives are. And we went all in on the nuclear DNA, which is basically, how we get our genes from our mom and our dad as the cause of disease. But there's this other theory out here by Dr. Doug Wallace, a children's hospital out in Philadelphia, in your guys' area, that actually mitochondrial DNA is the really important one. And disease is basically a factor of our lifestyles and the environments we live in. And that model has not really made it into the standard convention of care. And so doctors working with the NFL are, they're highly trained, really talented doctors who've been trained in the standard conventions of care. So they're probably not thinking about these things this way, and it's not really their fault.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of the NFL doctors and trainers, and I could be wildly wrong on this, but my guess would be their goal is optimization, right? How could we optimize performance?
Right.
What could we do with the body to optimize them so that they perform the best on the field?
Yeah.
Not so much, um, I guess protection. I'm sure that comes into it at some point, but I would guess the main goal is optimization.
I think you're right. I think the owners of the teams and the NFL itself, their interests are how much performance can we get out of this person before their career's over? Not so much how can we keep this person healthy so they perform as long as possible, because there's always somebody else who's going to come up that can replace the player, as we saw with the CTE stuff. It's like, you're used up and you were good for us, but now see ya,
Wild how quickly that happens. And then this is a whole other tangent for another day, but just you pay these guys to put a beating on their bodies and you cast them out. And then you see in 5 years from now or 10 years from now, they're broke. They have no money. They're going to jail for tax evasion or they're in some sort of debt. And you ask, well, how could that possibly happen? It's because like bringing these guys out there, you're not course correcting them at all. You're just giving them a bunch of money and saying, here you go. You're giving them all the medical, you're never teaching the life skills to kind of manage either their bodies, their finances, what have you, which is probably a good segue into where I want to take this was, there's a part of your work where the theory starts to expand a little bit beyond the muscle and tendons into recovery itself. And you kind of touched on that when you were talking about your background and how you started to sort of recover your body a little bit. You've written that even if training loads stay the same and nutrition is perfect, recovery can still fail quietly if the immune system and the circadian rhythms are disrupted. So I want to start on the immune side of that. And I apologize to people listening if these words sound completely crazy to you. Again, very passionate about them myself. I'm
Yeah.
learning about this stuff.
Yeah.
You focus heavily on mast cells, inflammation, chronic immune activation. For people who associate immune issues with colds or allergies, explain why immune signaling matters so much more for connective tissue health.
Yeah, so that goes into the clients that I was having. And so very high level, the mast cells are kind of like, they're kind of just like warning signs. They're monitoring the environment for threats, and they're emitting these. Histamine is the one that maybe most people have heard of that you associate. Like if you take a histamine blocker because you have bad allergies, that's coming from your mast cells. And so it's a good system until it gets overworked. And then, like so many things in biology, like a little bit is good, but too much is bad. And so they get chronically turned on, and these things that are meant to like trigger our defense systems actually start breaking down our tissues. It's not just histamine, it's growth factors, they're called, and it degrades the structure of our collagen. And it's really interesting if somebody wants to go down this rabbit hole. MCAS got formally created, like diagnosed or whatever the term is, in like 2012, and it's just gone up. And it's believed to be massively underdiagnosed, and you can just kind of see this curve with how all this radiation from cell phones and everything has increased. And there's research from this Swedish doctor, he's Swedish, basically showing that RF radiation activates the mast cells so that they're chronically open and emitting these growth factors.
I imagine this is starting to interfere with melatonin, sleep death, timing of recovery. So it's full cycle screwing up.
I think the melatonin stuff is actually maybe the most important thing in all this. And I'm glad you picked up on that, because I put it as a fifth mechanism in there as kind of a bonus thing, because it wasn't quite as directly related to the magnetic field, though it is related. The researcher, Dr. Andrew Marino, has shown how these fields will basically prevent your body from producing as much melatonin. But the blue light from our screens and everything, that's the big thing. And so if you're not producing melatonin, you're not repairing overnight. And it's that oxidative stress that I mentioned earlier, it needs to get cleaned up. And melatonin is the number one cleanup operator for that stuff. And then on top of that, it's a precursor to a lot of other immune system hormones and stuff, which I'm not even able to go off memory on because I'm not a biochemist, but it's all in my paper.
Listen,
So-
neither are we. So you're already talking levels
melatonin-
above where we are.
Pause real quick. I want to make sure I'm getting this correctly, right? To me, melatonin was always something your body produced to kind of initiate the sleep pressure. Are we saying it's more than that?
It is more than that. Yes, that's a really good question. Yeah. So basically, when the sun goes down, let's say we're living in a society that has no electricity, or somewhere around dusk, when it's dark enough that our eyes are not perceiving blue light anymore, we start releasing melatonin from our pineal gland. And that does help induce sleep pressure. It's one of the factors. It's known as like the hormone of darkness. And if you've ever taken a melatonin capsule, you feel the effects pretty immediately. But that's, I would say, not the most important part. It's really how melatonin works within the mitochondria to clean up those reactive oxygen species, free radicals, to prevent the oxidative damage. And it's like there's a lot of other factors going on. Like you need to have that deep rest and repair cycle in order to get rid of dead cells too. And like you're not just repairing these damaged ones. Some of them are so damaged you need to get rid of them. And if you're keeping those ones that you needed to get rid of around, that's going to lead to real problems because disease stems from these damaged cells. So yeah, so
That's
melatonin is, we're all chronically depleted of it for the most part these days.
So it's a lot more important than I thought it was. All right, good
A
to
lot
know.
more.
Glad you joined us.
Yep.
Tim's ready to go
right
lay down and
now-
go to sleep right now.
Well, listen, I right now I'm kind of going through a combination of behavioral change, becoming more healthy, and doing sleep is a big part of that.
Mhm.
I am a horrendous sleeper, and so I have began doing things to make myself healthier. And try to actually fall asleep like a normal human being and getting more restful night's sleep. So I find that ironically I'm discovering all of that stuff right now. So I'm gonna
Perfect.
put some of this stuff to some personal use
Yeah.
later.
Yeah. Well, that's been one of the most interesting things here is I'm talking to all these NFL fans and they're just like having their eyes, like everybody's got sleep problems. It's across the board. Like I've had sleep problems since I was 7 years old. So I've always felt like I'm unique. Nobody else has, but no, everybody has it. So I just had to deal with it earlier and figured it out.
What's fascinating is that we're in such an era too where you're constantly always stimulated by something.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that just exacerbates on it. And then when
It
you
does.
kind of start to factor in, these elite athletes now who are breaking down their body every single time they go into the gym, and they're probably going through the same thing. Like they're coming home, they're hyped up from a game, they're pumped up on adrenaline. There's no way they're sleeping in a hotel that night very well,
Yep.
So I'm just, as you're saying these things, all the combination of factors kind of explains why you have players that get injured and like never fully come back from that injury, right? Because it's always kind of lingering and you just don't know how to course correct it.
Basically, yeah, I'm really glad you mentioned that. The chronic overstimulation, it
Mhm.
plays right into that melatonin. So when your nervous system is overactive like that, you're producing cortisol. Cortisol and it's like the energetic. It's, in the morning, you're supposed to have high cortisol to give you energy and stuff. It's reciprocal with melatonin. You can't see my hands, but so the more
Yeah.
cortisol, the less melatonin. So
Right.
when that's really what at root what a lot of this comes down to. And these elite athletes, I think of them as canaries in the coal mine because they're just at the level that they're at, like even with the most elite like nutrition and all the things they can do, they're still getting exposed to so much more than the rest of us. And I was actually at a talk last night. Chuck Klosterman wrote a book called Football, and he was talking about who his favorite football player was, who the greatest one ever, and it was he was saying Jim Thorpe, and he was like, but you can't compare them because Jim Thorpe, like, he didn't have this. He was eating organic food because that's all there was.
Yeah.
And we talk about like Tom Brady would go to bed at like 8:30 p.m. Jim Thorpe went to bed at 8:30 p.m. because there was no electricity. Like, so it's just, we live in a different environment, and there's disadvantages built into it. And then you add on, like, you're an NFL player and you're like training every day, and you're watching film late into the night, and you're traveling between time zones, and then you're doing these high intensity night games with just like the light designed to mimic the sun just blasting on you, and it's very unhealthy.
And then they go home, and like everybody else, I'm sure they're addicted to their cell phone, right?
Right.
And they're
Yeah.
doom scrolling in the hotel room.
Yeah, and people just want to live their lives too, and just be like normal people and like watch TV with their kids or whatever. You know, it's all just baked into our daily existence these days.
It almost feels like the environment is stacked against us,
It almost feels that way, doesn't it? Yeah,
right? And I mean the current environment that we live in today, right? With the way technology is.
100%. Yeah, I think it's a really, really insightful thing you said there.
I'm not known for
Probably-
those, so thank you.
So even you get your flowers today, Mr. Phillips. Probably the strongest objection to your theory is, and you don't dodge it, which I give you a lot of credit for, is people point out that the 49ers have practiced in that area since the 80s. And if this exposure is the issue, why didn't they see this decades ago? You dug into that question, again, didn't dismiss it. So I'd like you to talk us through a little bit on what might have changed.
Thanks for asking that. And it's, again, like I was writing the article in my spare time, and so I wasn't trying to cover all my bases. But anyway, so what has changed was when they built the stadium there in 2014, they had a tiny little substation called the Old Tasman Station, and it was far away in like a second parking lot. And they moved that, and they created the Mission Substation, which is the biggest substation in Silicon Valley Power's infrastructure. And it was designed to power the stadium and all these data centers that they're now having in Santa Clara and Silicon Valley, because it's the home of all these big tech companies. So there's 3 50 mega amp transformers and some massive bushings. It's huge. So that was turned on in May of 2014, right before the team started playing there.
And I think there's like a little graphic that shows just like the piling of injuries of the 49ers. Of course, there's always exceptions to the rules. Not everything happens at home, but I guess that really doesn't matter because you're practicing there. And that's what's doing the weakening of the tendon. So yeah, actually, I might have even answered that own question myself there. Yeah, I think that's probably the most fascinating part. And it's worth emphasizing what you just said there too, is you wrote this article in your spare time and you weren't writing, a research paper that you were submitting to a scientific magazine. It was, for lack of a better term, for entertainment, for your own interests. I think sometimes people like to take information that's put out there and they like to bombard it with, trying to poke holes into it because you didn't cover every single scenario, not understanding that that's not the intent.
Yeah.
We talk about this a lot in this show. One of our favorite aspects of the show was originally called Conspiracy Realists, which is why we always open with that, is we just took conspiracies and tried to ask silly questions. So we're kind of doing today. Sometimes they're dumb questions to people that know way more about these things. But we're just trying to figure out how much of this could actually be real, how much of it is probably fluff. And what we've always come back to is that when there's a conspiracy, people try to find one thing that's wrong and they debunk it all. But if there's a narrative, there can be 1,000 things wrong with it and they still accept the narrative. So it's always funny that whenever there's that new information, it's always slapped with the conspiracy label, which is when I reached out to you on X, you were just like that, not a conspiracy, but I love it. And I laughed because that was the same perspective that I have. It's like, this is new research and we're immediately saying conspiracy, which brings us right into our show right here.
Right. Yeah. And it's really interesting, the reaction, like you said, with narratives, like that's how we've evolved around stories, right? So narratives are powerful in a way that like information isn't. And the media, of course, knows this. And the mainstream media, for lack of a better term, has almost across the board called it a conspiracy theory. There's one reporter, Scott Ostler at this SF Chronicle, who's taken it seriously, trying to get him to respond to my emails. He won't, but he's the one who's actually talked to the experts in the field who say, yes, this is a problem and this needs to be studied more. Everybody else has just said this is, junk science, conspiracy theory, without even the curiosity to dig deeper. And I've always just been like, if you look at my article, it was posed as a question. And yeah, there's some provocative statements in there, but mostly it was a question of like, is this actually causing it? I think it is. And here's why. And let's have a discussion. And I'm open to talk to anybody who's willing to talk in good faith. And I will say that some people that were calling me conspiracy theorists are now working with me. And
That's
so,
cool. Nice.
yeah, especially now that the players have come out and the Niners have come out and said, we have to take this seriously. Like, they're like, I don't know if they take me seriously or not, but like, well, he was on this before anybody else. So we should probably at least consider him. So it's been interesting because I don't hold grudges. Like literally, if you were calling me an idiot conspiracy theorist 2 weeks ago, and today you want to say, hey, teach me, I'm down.
It's a better
Good for
feeling
you.
too, right? It's like that vindication where like, hey, it does not happen in the age of the internet where you can change somebody's mind, but to be able to have real civil discourse and then somebody said, like, you know what, that's actually a really good point.
Yeah. And
No
and
better feeling in the world.
people have good points too on the other side. Like with the injury and stuff, I'm not really a statistician regarding injuries, and I kind of just accepted people's word about the stuff, and it's a little bit more nuanced. And so I'm digging into it with some data that I got from this Dr. Brian Sutter, and he did a whole like YouTube like debunking my thing. But you know, it turns out he's a good guy who's willing to just work on this stuff and talk about it. So you know, we're gonna learn. You know.
Yeah. I love
That's
it.
cool. That's the way it should be done too, right? Like, you know, and this is kind of across the board whenever somebody presents new information or a new theory, just like it's happening with you, right? The people kind of write you off and just immediately label you as a conspiracy theorist. Well, it's like, well, then fucking prove me wrong, man.
Yeah.
Like
right.
it's just a theory, right? Like
Yeah.
I have nothing to gain from this.
Yeah.
Like I noticed something occurring. I thought about it. This is the reason why I think it might be occurring. Let's talk about it.
Right. Yeah. What's the conspiracy? Tell me.
Yep.
Yeah.
Conspiracies. You've got
Exactly.
those 49ers on your fantasy football team and you're looking to win next year.
Exactly.
That's
Or,
what the
like,
conspiracy
the
is.
Patriots like are conspiring with the substations of Niners lose.
Well, you know what? With the Patriots, you can never rule anything out.
I
That's
know.
a good
Yeah,
point.
it's Belichick.
I
Let's
wanted
start
to
that
go
conspiracy
towards
theory.
something a little unexpected here,
Okay.
maybe a little more fun and probably not so true. But in the midst of this story gaining a lot of popularity, other players have kind of spoken out on podcasts or their feeds and whatnot. I don't remember who it is off the top of my head, and I wish I'd saved it. I think I saved it in one of my bookmarks somewhere. I can't find it. But one player was saying he felt like he got superpowers from playing in San Francisco. It never made him feel better. You go to comic books and any lore there, and there's always those like freak accidents that can kill a bunch of people, but still give somebody superpowers.
Yeah.
This is an obvious question that I think a lot of people are probably thinking here. Is there any scenario where this exposure to this, I guess, low power, consistent radiation could actually enhance the human bodies and be making some of these athletes better?
So first of all, I believe that was Fred Warner, and
It was actually.
Yeah,
Wow,
and
great call.
he's a beast. I mean, he's just
Maybe
insane.
an exception to the rule.
I mean, I almost think he's the exception that proves the rule. But I want to take your question seriously. I'm just going to say anything is possible, but theoretically it is possible. And this goes back to the research I mentioned earlier, Dr. Andrew Marino and Dr. Robert O. Becker, Robert O. Becker was an orthopedic surgeon who's really kind of broke ground on understanding bioelectricity. And I actually got his book right here. I'm gonna show it. The Body Electric. It's hard to read. And then Andrew Marino, this guy's my hero. Going Somewhere is his autobiography. Andrew Marino got his law degree just so he could represent himself when fighting the power companies in upstate New York who wanted to put these massive power lines over people's homes that were just really high magnetic fields. So he's where I got much of my inspiration and research from. But in his work, he found that so here's what would happen. They would do a study on rats and like magnetic fields or other RF, but often magnetic fields was what their interest was because of these power lines. And what would happen is the way the studies work is you do like 3 generations of rats, you expose them, and then they have kids, you expose the kids, and then some of these studies, like the 3rd generation, would be these little shriveled weakling rats that could barely survive. And then you get these ones where they got bigger, and the 3rd generation was stronger. And so his explanation is that these effects are nonlinear, and it affects everybody differently. And so you can't predict in any single person what is going to happen to them. So the interesting thing is that the industry used this kind of like, well, this one got stronger and this one got weaker. We're going to average them out and show that there's no effect whatsoever. And so that's
Right.
their line, is not that this stuff isn't bad for you or even that it could be good for you, just that it doesn't do anything. And it's a very important line for them, because if it does something good, it could do something bad. So it's no effect. And so do I think that it juiced Fred Warner so he was superhuman? Probably not, but I like the story and it's possible. And I think another thing that's related to that is something that people bring up a lot, pulsed EMF, PEMF. And are you familiar with this?
No,
So-
this is new to me.
Okay, so one of the arguments I get from people is like, they're like, this can't be bad because we used pulsed EMF to heal bones and to heal people. And it's a therapy. It's kind of like more of a cutting edge therapy. You'd get it more in like a biohacking circle than at a doctor, but NFL doctors are certainly familiar with it. And so, but we talked earlier about the kind of hormetic effect, the dose response cycle. Like a little bit is good, too much is bad. So PEMF uses the same mechanisms that I've outlined in actually mechanism number 2 in a very controlled dose to stimulate growth without going over that dose response level. And it does it, at very specific frequencies and so on. And so that's an example of EMF promoting growth, right? In a good way. Now, if you have cancer and you're giving yourself PEMF treatment, that might not be a good idea. And this is not medical advice. So go talk to your doctor about that. But so, yes, I do think that Fred Warner probably was turned into it. I think he was born a superhuman, honestly. And he's a talented guy who does a ton of work too,
I think that's very logical, a very logical explanation for Fred being the exception here. What a player too.
I know.
Yeah, it's interesting because cold plunging's like the big thing these days that everyone loves to do. And you're always told growing up, you go outside in the cold, you're going to catch a cold, it's going to make you sick. And now people are voluntarily getting in their bathing suits in the dead of winter and jumping in, and it's got health benefits. So probably oversimplifying your really good explanation of it, but that's where my mind goes to kind of make it more palatable to understand, what could or couldn't be happening here.
I think it is. It's a good generalization though, because like the idea of hormetic effect is like a small stressor is healthy. Like, so when we're walking, our bones are stressed. It's a small stressor that we then adapt to, and it makes our bones stronger. That's something you can generalize almost across the board. That certain things are not going to have a hormetic; they're just going to be poisoning. But in general, small amounts of stress are necessary in order to make us stronger.
One of the things we respect about your writings is, you haven't presented it, even today, you haven't presented anything as unchallengeable truth. You're very clear that it's a hypothesis. You've kept repeating that this was done just for your own knowledge because you were interested in it and presented it out there. What would it take to falsify the idea for you?
That's a good question, because like I said, like it's player to player. And so even if we go in there and we do imaging, and I believe I'll be releasing a new piece on this week or next week. Awesome. I believe you can look at the tissue and tell if it was degraded from a chemical process of oxidative stress versus an acute or a series of acute injuries. I believe you can do imaging and discover that. And you can do blood tests to determine if your body is under long-term oxidative stress and cellular dehydration. So we could study that. And if all the players came back great, then maybe it's not a problem. I think, to me, maybe less than falsification would be more of like another theory that's more compelling and applies specifically to the 49ers, And so, for example, I don't necessarily think this is the one, but there's a woman on TikTok or something saying that the EMF stuff is conspiracy theory and that Santa Clara is like one of the biggest Superfund sites in the country and it's toxic waste causing their problem. So
Okay.
maybe, I don't think
Interesting.
so, but maybe, make somebody else. One of the interesting things that's happened is like everybody tells me, they're like, why don't you look into this? Why don't you look into that? I'm like, why don't you look into it? Like I got my own interests, why don't you tell me to do your work for you?
That's how the internet works. You've
Yeah.
got to tell me. I'm going to tell you you're wrong, and then you're going to tell me why.
See, this is new to
That's
me.
pretty funny.
I was never a big social media user or anything. So it's like all of a sudden it's like, oh, there's just a million people on the internet that they're completely not resourceful themselves that want everybody else to do everything for them. And I like to do things for other people. So I had to stop because I realized there's just millions of people who do not engage in good faith. It's too bad.
It's amazing because you think about like a celebrity, right? And you often hear that celebrities say this or say that, and then they got to go these apology tours, and it's like, oh, why don't you just ignore it? And you're experiencing it firsthand.
Yeah.
We are the same way, and not this channel specifically, but there's many times, I've caught myself in the middle of a Facebook argument with somebody that they're never going to agree with you, never. And it's just like, I enjoy discourse. I like talking to people and getting ideas that challenge the way I think.
Yeah.
Tim and I, we've been great friends for I don't even know how many years. We argue every single day about things from a
Literally
point
every day.
of respect, right? Literally yesterday we were arguing about another topic that may end up being another episode one day. But that was like, that's the fundamental basis of this, right? Is like, that's how you learn. That's how you grow.
Absolutely.
And it's a wild place. And it is sometimes hard. I always say to our group chats, like every fiber of my body, I cannot allow that person to say that thing unchecked, and like it'll take me over sometimes. Like I just have to tell them that they're wrong, or like just tell them like be respectful or something like that. And it's just, you just got to know when to walk away sometimes. And man, it's a much better feeling, that's for sure.
And just taking the high ground, it's just better for your soul.
Oh
I've discovered that. Like I've got some pretty hateful stuff coming at me, and it just like when you turn around and you just take the high ground and you give them like just a little bit of point, and like so many people will just flip and be like, oh, this guy is actually a decent guy. Like maybe I was wrong.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
You know what? And I've talked about this a bunch too on the pod, and actually specifically in some recent episodes. A lot of those people online aren't real. Like I'm very much so convinced of it. They're just not. Some of them are, and most of them are who are being negative and just awful people, are mouth breathers who probably still live in their parents' basement. So don't give them your time of day anyway. But some of them are so ridiculous they can't be real. They're agitators who are there to generate engagement, and that's it. And I really try to look at them like I can't be bothered wasting my time, because I'm probably talking to a bot farm on the other side.
Totally,
it's a silly waste of time.
Yeah, totally.
One of the more fascinating things about this entire topic is its implications beyond football. And that's what I really liked the most about your background, was that this wasn't about football for you. This was really something that impacted your life beforehand, that you've now just kind of taken, extrapolated, and applied to something else that you enjoy. I think as people are talking about this, we're looking at it from the NFL standpoint, but I think there's something that can be taken away from it for our own lives. People work in office buildings for 8 hours a day. You've got kids that are in, concrete infrastructures, families that are living now because they're bundling up houses into, big complexes all over the place that are always next to substations or cell towers or high load electrical currents.
Yeah.
Is it fair? This isn't about to say, I'm sorry, let me rephrase it. Is it fair to say this isn't about acute danger, but potentially about longer term biological drift? Is there an impact that we can all take away from this that we should be aware of?
I think that's such a good question. And not only is it fair, I think that's the main point, actually, that's gotten lost in this discussion, that the whole reason we're talking about this is because it involves football and acute injuries. So I'm grateful for that. And what you said is exactly the larger point. We have changed our environment. And I don't know if you're a fan of Charles Darwin at all, but like if you actually read his work, he believed that the environment was the main factor, that changes in environment were really what precipitated these changes in evolution. And so in a way you could say that we've changed in the last 150 years, roughly since I think the telegraph was the first real commercial use of electricity. We've changed our environment radically, and it's only increased, and it's increasing faster. As you said, like they love to put cell antennas on apartment buildings because you got a bunch of people using their phones in them. And there's these Japanese studies that just show what happens when you remove a cell antenna from an apartment building. You have all it's called radiation syndrome or microwave syndrome. And these people have headaches and brain fog and all like insomnia and all these kind of just like all the things that like standard medical care doesn't really know how to deal with. They take the antenna away and the problems go away, you know?
That's
And
wild.
that's just one thing. Like you listed like a half dozen different things. And so like there's just, you can just go for days. I don't want people to be scared. Like the whole point of this is I'm not a fearmonger. Look at me. I'm the poster boy for tech abuse and chronic illness. It started when I was actually before I was born, because I was born early and I was put in an incubator, and they blast you with fluorescent light back in the day because the doctors wanted to see if you had jaundice. So for 10, 12 days, I'm in 24/7 fluorescent light as a little baby. And it's an interesting kind of microcosm of how we do everything. So they want you in this incubator that's got the temperature regulated and all these things because they want your immune system to not, whatever. And then you can't, like my mom, actually, she's a badass. She would come in every day and breastfeed me. But most babies' moms aren't able to do that. So it's just kind of like, we need to control the environment because it's unsafe and there's all these threats out there. And then we create a controlled environment that's itself maybe less of a threat in the short term, but creating a long-term deficit that we're all dealing with. And so I just throw this out there because I spent a good 20 plus years of my life ill in various ways. And to the point, I was almost non-functional at 3 different points in my life. There was a point when if I wanted to drink a glass of water, I couldn't hold it like this. I'd have to like hold it. I don't know if you can see this, like with my wrists like this and like drink like this. I couldn't open a door by myself. That's how bad the tendon stuff was. I'm completely healthier. I'm 50 years old. I have no health problems just because I know what to do. And like, when you know how, and I live in a city, it's not like the biggest city, but there's cell towers I can point to like within like a third mile. And, and I live not too far from some high voltage power lines, but I know what to do to take care of myself. And so I'm in great shape. And so anybody who wants to can. And I've like, I'll end this. I'll stop ranting, but I think a lot of people just are happy with the way things are. They like their devices. They like, they want to live in their apartment. They want to order Grubhub and whatever, that's how they want to live their lives. I'm not telling anybody how to live their life. Anybody that wants to do that. And I don't think things are going to change on a systemic level either. I'm not an activist, but there's people like you guys that are like, hey, I want to feel better. And I've noticed that these things are affecting me. And what can I do about it? And that's where I'm like, there's a lot you can do about it. And if you want, there's people out there to help you.
That's actually my next question for you, right? So, we began this conversation talking about the NFL, and that was kind of the crux of the combo. But throughout this conversation, we've certainly discovered that it affects probably everybody, at least in Western society, where the use of technology is integrated into daily life. It's almost impossible to escape it, right? Most people, even though you want to feel better, aren't gonna just up and sell their belongings and go live in the middle of the woods. That's just not practical for 99% of the US. So And again, I know, your goal isn't to sit here and be an activist or to provide people with medical advice, but for somebody that looks at you like, hey, Peter, you are able to kind of balance this world that we live in today with, whatever you're doing to make yourself healthier and feel better. What are some things that people can do that are practical that they can implement into their daily lives that'll help them feel a little bit better?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think I try to keep it as simple as possible. I'm not like one of those wellness guys that got a million routines and takes a million supplements and stuff. I just don't. I like fast food too. Like, you can live your life. I barely watch TV, but that's just because whatever. So here's what I do. Light is number one. And I mentioned nonlinear effects. They go both directions. So with light, the nonlinear effects go in the positive direction. So if you do some minimal things to take care of your light environment, you can get outsized benefits. So I would say the number one thing for everybody is make sure you're getting some morning sunlight. So go outside, and just if you just want to not stress and not think about it as too complicated, just get up and go outside and get a couple minutes, and then eat your breakfast and do whatever, and then go on a walk for at least 20 minutes. 30 minutes is actually the magic number, 30 minutes before 10 a.m. If you can do that most days of the week, or at least 3 or 4 days of the week, you're already ahead of the curve. But you do have to do one thing along with that. You need to block the artificial light before. So especially if you're getting up before the sunrise, that's the critical thing. If you wake up before the sunrise, it's wintertime, you either want to make sure you have very warm, like red or amber lighting, or you put on blue blockers and you keep them on until the sun is up. And then you go outside for 3 minutes, or open a window if you can't go outside. Just take 3 minutes to just calm down and breathe. Everybody has 3 minutes, right? Do more if you can. I would say those two things. And then on the other side, when that dusk hour comes and you look outside and it's like, the sky is like that kind of dark blue, and you just got the colors at the horizon. You're like, okay, this is the time that you want to actually start winding down for the evening. Not every single night. Go out and party and drink with your friends or whatever you do, like sometimes. But most of us, we finish work when we go home and want to chill with our family or whatever. At that point, you really want to block the artificial light as much as you can. And so again, it means dim, warm lighting. The way we measure light is in a term called Kelvin. So 2700 Kelvin is kind of the magic, like old school incandescent bulb color. I would say just go get incandescent bulbs if you can. Make it simple. LEDs are missing some important wavelengths that are very critical to our health. But do your best. Dimmer, warmer after that dusk, and give yourself a break an hour before bed. Turn off all your screens. If you need to be like, you've got teenagers and they might be like, whatever, like put your phone far away from you and tell them to call you. So you're not just like obsessively checking your messages. And then you look and you're like, and all of a sudden you're like, well, I should check that. And then you're scrolling Instagram for an hour. Like,
Yep.
boundaries on your phone at least an hour beforehand. And those three things. And then I do two more things that are kind of bonus. I expose myself to the seasonal temperatures. So if it's hot, I get out and get hot. If it's cold, I get out and get cold. And we kind of live in what I call permanent spring in our houses at 72 degrees Fahrenheit year round. It's like as light as we want it because we can just control all these variables. Your body wants to live with the rhythm of the seasons, and it affects your immune system. And so you do those things. And then the last one, some people have trouble with. I love it. I love seafood. I especially love shellfish, oysters, mussels, clams.
Samesies.
Yeah. So if you like that
Big
stuff,
fan.
double down on it. Have as much as you can. Salmon, sardines, mackerel, all the fatty fish. You can, and people say tuna is no good because of mercury. Actually, most tuna is fine because it has some selenium in it as well. And selenium binds to the mercury and doesn't even go into your body. But don't worry about tuna. Just have all the fatty little fish and the shellfish. Make yourself some soup with some clam shells in it. That stuff is magic. We were evolved to eat seafood and we barely eat it. And so those are like the 5 things
You hear that, Shane? Shane's not a
Very
seafood
Shane.
guy. Gotta
I'm
eat more seafood,
notoriously
buddy.
not a big seafood eater. Yeah,
Man,
yeah.
I've
I'll eat a
been
couple
to New
things.
Jersey. I know there's some good seafood out there. Like
There's
really
some
good.
good stuff
Looks
here,
phenomenal.
but for the most
It's
part,
phenomenal.
everybody that I know loves it. I'm just on the rare few. And ironically, as I've went down my own health journey, fish is probably the number one thing that's on my my DNA list of foods that I should be eating. That works well for me. But steak's up there too, so I'm,
So, I mean,
I'm
hey,
sticking
you
to
can't
that
go
as
wrong
much
with
as I
steak.
can.
Like, yeah, the steak's good. Like, but just find something that works. And if you can do it 3 days
Yeah.
a week, that's better than nothing. Like I'm out here eating
That's great
sardines
stuff.
and eggs for breakfast. Most people aren't going to do that, but like, I love it. So, and I do find though that a lot of people's distaste for seafood, I think, comes maybe from some like below the surface health issues that are kind of giving them a disgust factor or something. And when you get better, you start enjoying it more. It's a weird, I can't prove this one, but I've just observed it just with clients who I've worked with and friends and stuff. So
That's very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I got to
That's
say,
great
this
stuff.
was.
So,
Go ahead.
my bad. I was gonna say, so I actually try to do many of the things that you were just discussing there, Peter. I'm gonna venture to guess that when I wake up and I roll over and the first thing I do is grab my phone and start checking my emails, even though I do make sure that I go sit outside and get some sunlight within an hour of waking, I should probably not be looking at my phone as soon as I get up. Is that,
I
would we
think
say
you can
that that's
avoid it.
correct?
Yeah, it's really good to just let your nervous system kind of sink into the day, like as long as you can. And so, like, sometimes I'll just get up early, and honestly, the sun isn't up yet. I'll light a candle and lie in bed and just like let my thoughts just kind of process, and maybe even do a little writing or something. Not usually, but maybe. And just like, yeah, like your body wants to ease. It doesn't want to just get hit by like all this. You're
Mhm.
gonna have the whole day to get into that stuff. It can, like, unless there's something actually urgent, it can wait. And I know that feeling. Like I used to go to bed like excited for my cup of coffee in the morning. Like I'd almost like so excited for my cup of coffee that I couldn't fall asleep. And I just want to get up and go straight to work. And like, I get it. And like, it's not the best thing for us.
I was going to say this was an incredibly enlightening conversation with you. So cannot thank you enough for spending some time with us. Where can we find you on the internet? If you want to be found, since this is kind of new
I
territory
do
for
actually.
you.
Like, it's funny. Like I never had a big internet footprint, but now since everybody's talking about me anyway, I'm like, come straight to the source.
Embracing it.
Yeah. Sunlightislife.com is my main kind of website, where I have an app that anybody who wants to learn the stuff we were talking about, download the app. It's got all the information in it. It's free. Like you can, if you put your email address in and sign up to my newsletter, which I never send anything out, so there's no reason not to sign it up. Just, you'll get all this information laid out, very simple, and some tools on how to use it. I highly recommend just checking it out. And then
It's sunlightislife.com.
Yep. And then you can find me. All my social links are there. I'm living_energy on X, and on Instagram I'm sunlightis.life. And then I just created a website called 49erssubstation.com that's collecting all this information. So people feel free to check that out if you have more questions.
It's amazing. And we'll put all this in the comments below for everybody, so you don't have to worry about trying to catch us listening. You've got a great Substack too. That's where I read most of the articles, and you go really deep. The Twitter threads or the X threads are great. There's a lot of content in there, but if you want to just kind of read it and not have to click through each one of them, because it can be a pain on social media, I strongly recommend that too. And I'll make sure we link that below. That sounds like a pretty good kickoff for your newsletter too. Just like a once a month check-in and say, this is what you should be doing this month.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I've just been so busy, but yeah. Yeah. How about that? I'll promise, if you sign up for my newsletter, I'm not selling you anything, but I'll give you some free tips. And
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. There you go. Well, we thank you, and we thank each of you out there watching and or listening to us wherever you may be. Remember to like, follow, subscribe, share this with a friend. You know the whole spiel by now. Until next time, everyone, we will see you on the next one.